Hi, welcome to Eye Openers. I'm your host, Brittany, and each week I bring you insightful conversations with entrepreneurs that will help you make more money, become a strong leader, and build a business culture that you're proud of. Grab your coffee and let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Eye Openers, where we kick you off with not only caffeine to literally get your eyes open, especially after this daylight savings time. I don't know how it affects all of you, but I definitely had a slow go of it Sunday morning. A little bit better today. If you're watching us live, it's Monday, but coffee never hurts when you're looking for an eye-opening experience. And so today on Eye Openers, I am here with my friend Ryan. Ryan, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Brittany. I'm excited to be here.
Ryan, what are you drinking?
Well, actually, I've recently started brewing my own cold brew. I would love to lie to you and say that I'm drinking my own right now, but I'm actually drinking the Starbucks one. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, right there.
Nice.
It's really good. And it's really it takes a long time. Yeah.
But I love the Starbucks mugs. That's one of the Places mugs.
Yeah. I had about 100 of these.
Boston, what? Love it. Love it. I don't know if you know, but I used to live outside of Boston for like 15 years, moved from there now to California. We're learning so much about each other. The show's just starting. Yeah. Yeah. My husband's a New Englander and I always wanted to live out there, go to school. And so beautiful life out there, mostly in Providence, Rhode Island, but spent lots of time in Boston.
Oh, it's gorgeous out there. I love that part of the world. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I have about a year ago, I went to a retreat in Arizona called Savannah. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. A lot of my girlfriends out here in Santa Barbara have gone. I think they had really good Instagram marketing because a lot of people have been that I know. And it was just a fantastic kind of mental reset in a time where I was getting really burned out. We can talk about that later. But they had a pour over coffee setup in each of the rooms. And they usually have like an espresso, whatever. Like I know when I'm traveling for business, I'm like, okay, sure. Like before I get out the door, this was such an intentional kind of meditative experience because you want the damn thing, but you got to wait at least 5, maybe 10 minutes while you do this whole pour over situation. And at first, well, when I was there, I was like, this is fantastic. I have nowhere that I'm rushing off to besides like a sitting bath or a gratitude circle. And they're trying to teach us not to rush, first of all. And it was such an amazing experience that I bought the setup and have ever since been using it at home, even in a life that is much more scheduled and tight on time. I have turned this into a morning practice that I enjoy fully. So long story long, I am drinking a pour over coffee that I made.
I love that.
So, and I have some of those same mugs that you were showing there, which is just a fun way to celebrate different places you've been. So cheers to Starbucks for making that happen.
Yes, for sure.
But besides all my boring coffee talk here, I want to hear a little bit about you. So I know you a bit, and we got introduced by a fantastic person named Jenny, but let's let the audience know why you're here today, because they know I try to be discerning with my guests. I try really hard, to bring the best of the best that is just not famous yet, to share about business insights, to learn from those who maybe you don't recognize on the screen, but have valuable business insights and eye-opening moments to share.
Well, I think the reason that you brought me on here is because I'm the best of the best, Brittany, if I'm honest. So I've been an entrepreneur for about 15, 16 years. Started 6 companies. I've sold 4 of them over the last one in 2020 and started 2 others. One of them that I'm running now called Hope Guide. And, I've had a lot of crazy experiences. I mean, I didn't start off as a natural entrepreneur like some people seem to have the gene for it, that it seems like. I had to learn it. And I think the beauty of that is because it didn't come super naturally for me. I know what it took me to get here because I had to learn those lessons intentionally.
Right. Of course, I've had conversations with Ryan, not live, and before the internet was working. And we would talk about some of the kind of highlight reel of those highest highs, which happen in entrepreneurship, and those lowest lows that happen. And oftentimes they're tied together. And that's what makes owning a business such a roller coaster and really not the faint of heart. But you told me a story about like one time that you lost about $500,000 and were down to your last hour of cash. And I have begged him to tell you guys the story because this is all of our worst fear. This is everyone's worst fear. And I'm just curious, like, how did you get there? And how did you crawl your way out of it?
Oh, I can't remember if when we were speaking personally, Brittany, I told you the full scale of how I got out of it. So we'll do that. But I mean, basically what it comes down to is back in, I would say probably I'm that bad with timing, but 2014, 2015, I had this brilliant idea, just like all of my ideas are brilliant. And it was so brilliant, I didn't need to test it in any way, shape, or form before going ahead with it. And it was one of our businesses. And we had about $500,000 in cash in the business at that particular point. And I was all in. I knew this idea was brilliant. I knew it was going to make us so much money. It was wonderful. And over the course of 3 months, as I went all in on this, we lost everything in the company except for $300. It was roughly about an hour's worth of cash flow, if I remember correctly. Maybe less than that. And I hadn't taken a salary that entire 3 months because I could see my spend was going to be a lot. And, I learned some lessons and we can get into that if you'd like, but that's what brought me to the place of thinking, oh my goodness, like we might be out of money. We had some personal cash we could bring in, but that, at the spend rate, that wasn't going to last very long. And I thought that might be the end of my entrepreneurial journey at that particular moment. And so it's interesting the way that we got out of it, because it's a little bit of a spiritual story. Hope that's okay. Because in times of distress, I start thinking about external resources that I can access. What can I do to help me to get out of this? And so I was kind of like I literally have an hour. So I literally went down to the river to pray because I feel moved. I feel connected to nature and the ineffable, the great mystery when I'm by water moving. So I went down to the river to pray and I was like, what am I supposed to do? Because I haven't got paid in 3 months. I have to pay a team and I have a pretty big payroll. And I was out of ideas because I went all in on this really bad idea. And ultimately what happened is I heard this voice kind of in my head say, you're doing this and I want you to do this. And it was this idea of like, you're trying to hold on to everything so tight and control everything. And you need to let go. And so in this particular case, what that meant to me is I needed to make a commitment to make a substantial donation to an organization that we believed in that helped children and widows in Africa. And so I made that commitment, but I knew that I needed to make that commitment publicly so I didn't get out of it because I knew that I'd feel tempted to get out of it.
That's interesting.
And so, right, because I needed the accountability. Like sometimes you do it for show, like, oh, well, we want people to know we're good people or something. No, it's not the motivation. I wanted people to say, hey, you promised you were going to give that money? And so it wasn't like a ton, but it was, I think our minimum was $30,000 and it was going to scale up to an unlimited amount based on an event we were doing. But we promised a minimum of $30,000. And because I knew I needed to change my perspective and I was sitting from a place of loss and of I don't have enough and scarcity. And so we had an event that was about to go live. I think it was the next day. And when that event went live, ended up being our most successful event to date. And we ended up making every penny of that $500,000 back, plus some. Yeah, now the event lasted 5 days. But over the course of 5 days, we made every penny of that back, plus some. And that's after our pledge that we made to the other organization. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go down to the river to pray more often.
Ryan, you're onto something that is super important. I was literally just on a call with some very, very high level other executive coaches, consultants that, work with executive teams, whatever. And so much of what we were just talking about was mindset.
Yes.
And feeling like that's what can set you apart from other business owners is not that you have this incredible set of knowledge that makes you superior, but it's like this resilience or this like inner strength. And part of that comes with like that mindset that you just described, like not coming from a place of scarcity all the time and being able to transition that, having that faith or that abundance, right? That the universe has taken care of me before, how will it take care of me again? Yes. And again, you said, is it okay to be like spiritual about this? But I think the truth is maybe that's the path. Like when we pretend like there's nothing mystical about what's going on, I think that's when we actually miss the point, or when we miss the opportunities, or we don't actually see everything that's available to us. And so, like you said, when you were in that place, and you were kind of calling upon that energy to show up for you, it did. What would be possible, right, if we stayed in that place, in that mindset, and stayed open to that more often?
Yeah.
And so we had touched on this subject earlier about burnout, but, like you said, you've been through several of these building and selling situations with your companies, but getting to a place where you had been burnt out, how do you get around that? Because I'm going to be totally transparent with you. My husband owns a business. I own a business. And I'm helping with both. I work with big companies. Yeah. There are some weeks where I am working way too much, and it feels completely overwhelming. And I know other entrepreneurs too who are just burning at both ends. What did you learn from being in those situations yourself, and how do you do it better now?
This seems to be a lesson that I've been put on this earth to learn over and over and over again. And I learn something, and then I sort of unlearn it, and then I learn it again. And I keep learning to do it better and better. The first time I learned that lesson, we had sold one company. We were running two others at the time, a few months away from starting another one. And I was a terrible entrepreneur. I didn't really know what I was doing. And so that I was compensating for that by doing everything myself. I wasn't trusting the people that I had hired. I didn't have good processes in place, processes for you Americans. And I knew that I needed to escape this micromanaging, over controlling kind of nature that I had, which is the reason I was burning out. I wasn't doing things well. I was just working harder. They say work smarter, not harder. I was working harder, not smarter, all the time. So I knew the path, but I wasn't taking it. And so we made a decision. I said to my wife at the time, I said, I think the only way that I'm going to learn the lesson that I need to be the entrepreneur I want to be is to leave the country and leave my local business behind. And there's a few things that I had to do in order to do that. I need to hire some good people. I needed to trust them. I need to have really good processes in place. But I had all of those things. And I need to just trust it's either going to sink or swim, and I'm going to learn a lesson. And so we ended up leaving the country and going to, it was a 1-year trip. We did 32 countries, every continent. Over the course of the year, we moved on average every 3 days. So it really was difficult to run a business, in that environment. Oh, by the way, with 4 children as well. Yes. One of them was 8 months old. It was spotty internet and all that kind of stuff.
I'm speechless. I mean, we got 4 kids, like just in one location.
It continued until we had 6. Then we kind of stopped for a minute. But I was in Argentina, and I said to my team, it was a music school in Vancouver, BC, Canada. I said, listen, I'm going away. Don't talk to me for a month. And that was like the big idea. It was like, let's see how this does for a month. And Brittany, I got to tell you, I was so stressed that whole month. Like it was like, because I just imagined everything was falling apart the whole time, But I was really disciplined for like 3 weeks. And at 3 weeks, I reached out to the director of the school, and I said, the tone was basically like, okay, tell me everything that's, that's blown apart. And I essentially called an emergency meeting a week before I was supposed to talk to them, because I hadn't heard anything from them and it was stressing me out. I told them, don't talk to me. And they didn't talk to me. And then I thought that meant everything was blowing up. So we had this emergency meeting. I met with the team and I said, okay, like lay it on me. What's going on here? Like, how is everything falling apart? And they were like, nah, everything's been going great, actually. I don't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere between 10 and 15% that the business had grown in the month since I'd been there. We had a great influx of clients. And the funny thing is, my first response was not gratitude. It hurt my feeling. Yeah. Like, I thought I was more important than that. And it turns out they were doing a better job without me there.
That's such an important story. And I really am so glad you can be candid about that and laugh about it now, because in the moment, it is scary. And it is literally our brain like telling us, no, we like have to be important. We have to be needed. We have to be valuable, because what if we're not? And that threat can take you all the way back into, if I'm not a valuable part of a group, am I going to be accepted? And am I going to have that kind of protection, that part of us that feel safe. It's a hierarchy of need, literally, right?
Yeah.
And so to question your ego almost in that way, and ego gets such a bad name, but we need our ego to stay alive. It's part of our self-preservation. Having a healthy ego is really important for having a good life. And when your ego gets questioned in that, it's a really, really challenging time. But it can be such an eye-opening moment to realize, the way I thought I needed to exist, the way I thought I needed to be important or be so centralized in this business ecosystem or whatever I had created, that's the thing that is probably not true. Do I add value? Do I deserve to exist? That's totally different. Do I need to operate in this way? And potentially, is there a better way to operate? Yes. Wow. What a great opportunity.
Oh, it was. And speaking about mindset, like it was really a mindset update that was required. And the mindset for me was, I am getting my personal need for validation, for like worth out of my activity in this business. And that's fine. I mean, it's not great, but it's fine if that's what you want to do. But it was costing me everything, including burning me out. And it wasn't worth it, ultimately. That business went on to, become the 4-hour work year. I did that for 5 years. I did quarterly meeting with my director for 5 years and continued to grow. And then I sold it. So it didn't need me. Not in that way. Not in that way.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I just love this story so much. And it brings me to like this point about neuroscience, because so many entrepreneurs they actually have a pretty good risk tolerance.
Yes.
Versus like any like segment of the population. And so I've always been so curious, and I ask people about their stories and what's led them to this place, because there's got to be some patterning that gets us there. And oftentimes in entrepreneurship, there's some kind of comfort in the chaos that people do, right? Though, like, I find for some entrepreneurs, there's some part of that either is familiar or gives them that thrill ride that they need. But there was some patterning previous to them starting their business that was there in a similar way. Do you mind sharing how that resonates for you and what that brings up?
For sure. I mean, yes, I grew up in a very chaotic environment. And so chaos is comfort for me. Anything other than that meant that I had to listen to my body. I had to listen to the silence. And that meant I had to become comfortable with uncomfortable thoughts. So there was a certain amount of escaping from the pain of dealing with the difficult things I experienced as a child that I was seeking after. And so there was a certain element of going beyond what would be a normal risk tolerance and perhaps even a reasonable risk tolerance in order to find the chaos as a salve, or maybe a distraction. Maybe it's more like a distraction. From dealing with that stuff. Interestingly, I went to a clinic called Amen Clinics. Are you familiar with them? Yeah, they did great work, and they did SPECT scans. And he saw this, he showed me this pattern. He said, this is called the trauma diamond. And he says, you're lit up like a Christmas tree. I was trying to figure out what was
talking about the brain, for those of you who aren't familiar.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. Scan of your brain. He showed you.
Yes. It's a SPECT scan of your brain. Yeah. And he says, you're lit up like a Christmas tree on this diagram. He says, by any chance, are you an entrepreneur? And I said, that's a weird question to ask, but yeah, I am an entrepreneur. He's like, I see a lot of entrepreneurs with this pattern. And so back to your point, Brittany, I think that, and I've met a lot of entrepreneurs that we made a decision somewhere along the line because of something we experienced, often as children, that we are never going to be dependent on somebody else the rest of our lives. And the best way to do that in our culture, especially where we're rewarded for it, is to go into entrepreneurship so we have more control over our own future.
Right. It's wild. But it can also, again, here's like another eye-opening opportunity to look at that. So like when you were presented with that information, you could maybe see the places where, oh yeah, like I can see the makeup of what led to this, that led to the next, that led to me becoming this serial entrepreneur. And like you said, there's so much of our society and our culture that rewards you for it. Like it's cool to be an entrepreneur right now. It's awesome to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, but there can also be a dark side to that too.
Oh, very much. I mean, for me, working I mean, I would regularly work 40 hours straight, not sleeping, not eating, having a little bit of water. And I thought I was invincible. I would do that at least once a month, sometimes once a week. Because my thought was, I'm going to get 40 hours in right away. And then I'm going to do 40 hours in the rest of the week. And I'm getting, not 40 hours, more than that. It was more like 60 hours the rest of the week. And I'm getting way more done than anybody else. And it ended up not just burning me out. It had really negative effects over time on my body, on my health, something I dealt with for years.
Yeah.
So there is a dark side for sure.
Yeah. And sometimes we're chasing something that feels, it's almost unattainable because you just keep changing the metric on yourself.
Oh,
you keep moving, right? The goalpost. And it's like this never ending race that you can find yourself in. And then you just think, now I have to work 120 hours a week to get rid of it. Now I have to do something just even crazier. And that's how we perpetuate this almost like unhealthy cycle with it. And so talk me through how you worked to kind of heal yourself out of that and how it's led to your most recent venture today.
Okay. Well, I mean, you talk about the dark side, Brittany. I had a number of brain injuries, so that contributed. I've had 25 concussions. I'm into some extreme, again, high risk tolerance. So I'm into some extreme sports and I do some crazy stuff. And back in, bad for timing, I'll say 2018 probably, I started to get really, really depressed, really anxious. And I didn't know why, and I couldn't get out of it. Like before, I could just work more. And that seemed to be the cure for any negative feelings. But it really started to drag me down to the point where I wasn't even very functional. And I later realized I had PTSD. I was diagnosed with acute PTSD, but the doctor said complex PTSD. And that's, gave me sort of an understanding of what I was experiencing. He said to me, you have PTSD. I said, I don't know about that because I didn't go to war, And I said, well, tell me what PTSD is. He started to describe the experience. And I said, but I've never not felt that way. Isn't that like what living is? Like, isn't that just how every human feels? And he's like, no, this is not how every human feels. And but it gave me hope that maybe I could feel better. And so I ended up, I was suicidal, Brittany, every single day and extremely suicidal. I had 6 kids. So I had to figure out how I had to do something different. I couldn't follow that impulse because I didn't want that to transfer to them. And so I said, okay, well, I sold my company, this last company. I have some money. I'm just going to spend, what's the point of having it if you're dead? So I ended up spending $300,000, throwing money at every possible thing I could do to try and figure out a way to heal from this experience so that I could be there for my kids in the way I wanted to. And maybe even have a good life myself, because I was always feeling the sense of danger my entire life.
Oh, wow.
And so I spent all that time, all that money, and I realized at the end that most of it wasn't even necessary. I was grateful that I had the ability to just throw money at to figure out the problem. But most of that wasn't even really necessary. What I needed was someone to give me some guidance along the way. I needed someone to say, hey, I understand the thing that you're experiencing, and I've taken the time to understand as best as I can your experience. And this is the bridge from point A to point B. I would have saved a lot of time. I would have saved a lot of money, but that's not even the big issue, because I was sitting thinking I was fortunate enough to have the money to solve this problem. But what if I only had $250,000? I probably would have been dead. Or how about so many people, 100,000, 50,000, 20,000, 10,000, or like some people, I have enough for 5 sessions this year. Is that going to be enough for me?
Right.
The answer is in many cases, it's probably best not to start. And it broke my heart. And I just felt this calling. I had retired. I'd sold this company. I'd retired. And I was like, I feel like I'm supposed to do something meaningful with my life. Instead of this time starting with where can I make money? I wanted to start with where can I find meaning? Where is the purpose in the meaning? And so I started a trauma therapy company in Canada, which I've since transitioned to my partner there so I could focus on the company in the US. But that was my first foray into helping people heal from trauma. And now I run an organization called Hope Guide. And our objective is to reduce the barrier of entry for people to heal from trauma so that they don't have to spend $300,000 and spend 5 years or 10 years or 15 or 20 years trying to solve this problem. We're trying to bridge the gap between very good research that's out there. We understand actually trauma very, very well. Mm-hmm. We understand what is helpful for people overcoming trauma, creating the bridge between their experience and those particular, not just modalities, it's also habits, practices, what we call like analogs, which is like the simple things you can do for yourself that mirrors those kind of modalities. And so that's our mission at Hope Guide, is to bring that to people and make it as trauma therapy, trauma healing accessible to as many people as possible.
Fantastic. This story, it just rings so, I guess, like near and dear to my heart, because over the course of my work, I went from working in community mental health to having a private practice to then transitioning that to working with entrepreneurs, their teams, their businesses. And the truth is I never stopped being a therapist because it's just the setting is different. And what I need to call myself in that setting to be most effective, it changes. But the privilege to sit with people in that space and to be a resource or validate their experience or whatever is something that I feel so honored to do with people. But even more specifically, like we mentioned, working with these group of people identified as entrepreneurs, there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of pain and struggle. And even if you don't identify as having trauma with a capital T, like each one of us has been in those moments where you were losing sleep at night or things felt really uncertain for you and you probably had some sort of reaction in your body. And my dream is for us to get closer and closer to this place where we can all talk about that. My husband, he works in psychedelics, and I dream of there being this bridge between those that identify as these like really high functioning, like people who can make a big impact in the world, but creating this insight and awareness, connecting them more to themselves, like not running away from those feelings that come up, not creating such a high level distraction for yourself. That is either your business, your team, your latest venture, like whatever it is, but actually tapping in to whatever those signals that you're being sent and then like leveraging that. I just think, imagine what we could create in the world if we actually were in resonance, if we were in, like rhythmic attunement with who we are and maybe with those closest to us, our communities. I just think it could be so amazing. So I'm so excited to feature you here on Eyepreneurs and have this conversation with you, Ryan, because you have literally taken what you've learned over the years and have now turned it into something that's going to create really great positive impact in the world. And so thank you for being a person of such integrity.
Oh, thank you, Brittany. And thank you for the work that you do too. I 100% agree with you on the entrepreneurs, that we have such an opportunity for impact and helping them to work through trauma it's like a one to many, like it has so much potential to really make a difference in the world. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, what I've seen when I've helped, it could be like a CEO example. The other day, I was doing a whole VIP day with him and I asked, what's been the most impactful thing we've done in these last 8 hours? And he said, that we spent 2 hours like reflecting on for parts of his narrative that got him to where he is today, like the good, the bad, the ugly, like, and that's shaped his leadership style. And he's like, wow, that was so impactful because I wasn't able to make those connections before between the things that have happened in my life, the meaning I made out of those things, and then how it impacted my behavior and really the way I lead and the way I touch other people every day. Right. And if we're not even aware of it, if we're not even thinking about it, then we're not conscious about it. Right. Yeah. So if we can make that connection, and then we stand a chance, right, to have some awareness, be more intentional, be more conscious about the mark we're making in other people's lives.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, again, I'm so grateful for you coming in and sharing, especially about Hope Guide. How can people reach you if they're curious to learn more?
They can go to hopeguide.com to learn more about my organization, and they can go to ryanpink.com if they want to learn more about me.
Awesome. We'll make sure that that is linked in all the show notes, wherever you're seeing this now. If you're watching us live, then you can certainly reach out to my team and we can put you in touch with Ryan as well. Without those of you guys watching and engaging, it would just be me chatting with Ryan, which isn't so bad, or me talking to myself, which, is questionable. But we really, really love that there are people out there interested in this message and engaging with it and helping us spread the good word on eye-opening moments in business and your life. So until next time, thank you all for watching. Thanks for joining us this week on Eye Openers. Make sure to visit brittanyDrose.com/podcast for this week's show notes. And if you found value in today's episode, I would so appreciate you giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts or share it with a friend. Also, don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. This all helps to support the show.